Yo, what it is, YouTube? It's your boy Nissy coming back with part 2. Ooh, I rhyme right there. All right, so now that we kind of got the drums thumping and hitting hard, everything is really sounding very cohesive. Now what I want to do is I actually want to work with my music. I like to bring in the instruments at that point, kind of like mixing the beat. Sometimes I mix the beat first. Sometimes I mix the vocals first. You know, I kind of treat myself like I'm a rock inside of a river. I just go with the flow. Wherever the current says go that way, start with this, I go, you know. When you're doing a full mix, it's a lot of stuff running through your head, like a lot of stuff all over the place. So you got to make sure you keep yourself calm and you just do what feels good. Go with the vibe, you know, like, you know, some people like to have a step-by-step formula, but me personally, this is music. So I like to go with the vibe, what makes me feel good. Because as long as you can make the shit feel good, then that's what's gonna make people really like the song. You know, it could sound good, but if somebody says, something feels off about it. If you ever made music in the studio, people say that like, something feels off, you know. That's something that's harder to fix. It's easy to make something sound good, but it's harder to make something feel good. So that's why feeling is more priority for me personally. So let's get to listening to some music. I kind of treat my music bus kind of like McDonald's. You know, when you go to McDonald's and they're whipping up a Big Mac, what they do is they always put that little bit of McDonald's McDickies sauce all over the bun before they actually start to put the pickles and the lettuce and all that shit. So you know, I was making an observation with this. I wanted to add a little bit of warmth. I looked at the tracks, so you can't see it like you can't see it over here, right? But I usually like to look at the track names, and I was seeing that a lot of the sounds the producer were picking was already loops, you know, stuff that he already crafted himself. So I said, okay, I don't need to reinvent the wheel here. You know, he already picked his sounds. All I got to do is just add a little bit of warmth and make it fit inside the track. So I like to use something like a J37 tape. I hop on that J37 tape and I pick which different flavors do I want, like Cajun, jalapeno, lemon pepper. I kind of see it like that in a situation where I'm adding flavor. And I like the tape as well because it kind of sometimes gives a bump in the low mid. It actually adds a little bit of warmth, kind of brings the music forward a little bit, and that's what I want. I kind of want everything to be forward and in your face. Sometimes I might want to push it back, but this is a situation where I want it forward. Because the tape is kind of adding like that little low mid bump, a little bit more proximity. So after that, you know, I usually start off on the actual macro situation. And in the previous episode, you know, you paid attention to how I did not even sidechain the 808 and the kick to it. So, you know, in music, you know, sometimes you got to talk to the artist, talk to the rapper. Don't turn into Sherlock Holmes and be asking them a bunch of questions, because they are coming to you because they understand you know something. But you can still say, hey, like, did you already sidechain the kick and the bass together? It kind of sounds like that. That's what I did. That's literally what I asked the producer, and he said, yeah, I already sidechained it. So that told me, okay, I don't even got to do that. So if you come into this stuff with a predetermined mindset, well, I gotta sidechain the kick in the bass because when you start doing that dumbass shit, bro, you gonna fuck up the song, bro. You could make your life way easier by just asking somebody a simple question. That sample has a little bit of violin crackling and all that stuff, and sometimes that stuff can start piling up. So in a situation like this, what I did is I actually, you know, just boosted this up a little bit. That 3K, 4K, 5K. That's where sometimes the presence is, just boosting up a little of that mid range. And I like the fab filter because you can start to see like, okay, there's some noise right there and all that shit. So, you know, kind of going back and forth between using this filter as well as the J37 to kind of like do my positioning for the mix. And then after that, I think I had like a stock EQ, just kind of rolling off a little bit more of that low end as well, just really helping things clear up. So I put the J37 tape first, then I started working backwards. But sometimes I might use different plugins. Gotta have an ear to know, okay, that's the one I gotta fix. You know, it's kind of like in school when you're kind of playing, like, you know, you're playing basketball or something like that. You're trying to pick who you think is gonna be on your team. You gotta look at it, people, and kind of make an observation. You look at the tracks and make an observation with your ears. You got an ear imagination, like, that track is kind of off. But you gotta listen to all the music together to make a decision like that. So the very first thing I do is I identify what's like the main melody and everything like that. Sometimes the reference will tell you, sometimes the producer will tell you, but usually in the reference track, you know, you'll kind of know. Or sometimes you will just hear all the tracks by themselves at zero and kind of hear like, okay, like this is the main melody. So it's kind of like a combination of these two sounds together. And the very first thing I did was I used the REQ, kind of cut off a little bit more of that low end. It was kind of like a pad or whatever. It had like a lot of sustained energy building up, a lot of RMS building up, you know, at the very top right here. You hear that little grocery, I was trying to like boost that, like that sound specifically, because that's kind of where the movement of the song is coming from. That little, it sounds like FL Studio grocery, without it, it kind of like loses that feeling. Then after that, I just did a little bit of the high pass filter, you know, just listening to everything all together. Then after that, we had this sound right here, you know, coming back as well. You know, this sound, I feel like it was taking up a little bit too much mid-range. It was starting to clock stuff up. So I cut out a little bit of mid-range, and then I compensated for that, kind of boosting this right here. So really just a situation where I'm understanding like, okay, this is the main melody right here. So this is the star of the talent show. But then this one right here, this is the sidekick, you know, this is the side chick, you know. So this other melody, which kind of plays on top of it, you know, I kind of started to carve out that mid-range and I boosted this right here. So sometimes, you know, it's all about the front to back positioning. But on the, you know, this one right here, this is a free plugin. I start to use something like a stereo wideners too to add a little bit more of, you know, just kind of a real estate, adding a little bit more open, kind of giving it more like a backyard type of omnispheric type of bigger sound. So I like to use something like this. This is a free plugin, so you guys can download this one too. But what it kind of did is when I kind of turned it off, you hear how the main melody was kind of like stuck inside of the drum kit. It wasn't really like glued. It didn't really sound that good. You know, sometimes you want to glue shit, sometimes you want to stretch shit. Like when you was in elementary school, sometimes you got to glue a piece of thing onto the paper. Sometimes you got to stretch the Play-Doh. You know, it's literally elementary. Like, don't overthink this stuff. So after that, we had a SSL channel right here. I like to use a bunch of different types of channel strips because they all are creating separation on the melodies through tonality. Like API is a little bit more punchy sounding to me. Then you have something like a REQ, which is kind of like very musical, very smooth. Then you have something like a SSL, which can be kind of like in between all of those. So also creating separation, not through the frequencies like that I'm carving out, but also like the tone of the damn channel strips, bruh. kind of has something like that little bell bloop 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 type of sound. So I started to, you know, push the transient, and I did a little compression, because oftentimes if you use something like a compressor on the SSL, you can even go like limiting mode. It will start to add a little bit of that transient. And cool enough about the SSL, it has automatic makeup gain, so you don't really got to worry about, you know, if you're fooling yourself with level. But if you do go past this first light, right, if you start to go past like this to the second light, then the you know, the volume kind of sounds a little bit louder than what it really is, which is kind of interesting. So next thing after that, we have a basic add REQ just on a sound that comes really towards the end, but I feel like it just needs a little bit more presence. So I'm paying attention to the arrangement right here. Let me show you guys a little bit better. You know, this spot in the mix is kind of a little bit more let me see right here. So you see how like it doesn't have all of those other instruments you know, stacked on top of it. So I used this basic REQ, pushed a little bit of mid range. This is a Rhodes piano, so oftentimes when I hear a piano or just any instrument that's very long, I'm trying to figure out a way to make it more solid, image a little bit better. So that's where a slow compressor like something like a LA2A can come in handy. It's an optical compressor, right? So it uses light to do the compression. Funny thing, people always say, oh, the speed of light, like the light is very quick, but for some reason the LA2A wasn't paying attention to the day when them boys said that. So the LA2A has a very slow attack, so it's not very grabby. You know, that transient I just enhance. I don't want to, you know, grab it too much, and I still want it to feel that point of the Rhodes, you know, the tippity top, the sharp part are the Rhodes. But then you got something like this LA2A doing some compression, clamping down on the signal, helping add some solidity. But pay attention to how the sound is kind of like bouncing all around. That slow release is clamping down and saying, sit in your seat, little boy. Stop moving around so much. Okay. So then after that, you know, we had these other sounds right here. I don't think I did anything to them. I think this was like a one-shot effect in the beginning or some shit. Knowing when to do something is just as important as when not to do something, because sometimes something already sounds good and you just don't want to fuck it up. You know, I see sometimes people like, oh yeah, I'm gonna put an SSL on every single channel. Yeah, but does it need it though? And sometimes those analog components, they add noise and they're smoothing out all your shit. I don't want everything to sound like a goddamn pancake, bruh. You know, sometimes you want stuff to be hard, sometimes you want stuff to be soft. That's how you create separation and density and all that stuff like that. You know, contrast. You telling them what north is, so because they know what north is, they know what south is, because they know it's that way. So obviously there's something behind me, and that's that way. You know, if you tell them what left is, now obviously they're gonna know what right is, because well, you just told them that left is right here. So you know, it's a situation like that. After that, we had just something like the Avid stock EQ, and I love using stock plugins just because they're so freaking simple. I just whip them out real quick and bam, there you go. Then after that, I use the spreader. So these two were like the voxes and stuff like that, and I only used the filters at that point just to you know, position everything. You know what I mean? I like the stock Pro Tools filter because it's known to be very gritty. So understanding the tools sometimes, you know what I mean? I always find it funny when people say EQ is about rolling off mud. When you do this move, it's because you're rolling off mud. No. It's about the distance. Your ear already knows that. Your ear, like your human ear literally already knows that. You know that, right? Like your body already knows that if I hear less low end, chances are something is a little bit farther away from the mic because I hear less on. And if you hear more low end, the chances are it's closer to you. So you can use that in a way to front to back, north to south, kind of being like a tour guide for the listener. You telling people, oh, this is in the front, this is in the back. And I felt like that was just a little bit too upfront. So I used the EQ to push it back. Okay. So after that, we have something like the two guitars, and I use the plugin like CLA guitars. I love it just because it's just very simple, very intuitive, and you can get a pretty good sound from it pretty quickly. So this first guitar right here, I think this was more like a support guitar. You're not really supposed to hear it. It's more like something to support the hook. And you can kind of tell because the hook already has like so much more activity when it comes to like these pads and these vocal chops. And, this guitar is just more to support it. Yeah, so I wanted that to, every time it comes through, I want it to have some presence. I want people to really feel it. So I use CLA, guitars, which is a pretty good plugin. It's obviously a guitar plugin, so it must sound good for guitars. Sometimes you got to use your common sense. So this one, I believe this is parallel compression. Because CLA vocals, I think the compression part is parallel compression. So used a little bit of this parallel compression, added a lot of presence to the guitars, boosted a little bit of top, and cut off a little bit of bottom. And that was pretty much it for that guitar. That, it was coming through once in a while, but every time it came through, you felt it. Now, at this point in time, I remember the producer talking to me about it. He's like, oh, man, this sound is really important to the, the makeup of the music, that momentum. Literally, this second guitar right here was important for the momentum in the context of the song. So I said, oh damn, before I even got the stems, he was already talking about how important that sound was. So I was already like, okay, when I hear that sound, I'm gonna make sure it cuts through and it feels big, right? So I use the CLA guitars here again and kind of like doing the same exact settings, pushing a little bit of that compression again, and I use the same settings of push on both of them because it kind of glued everything together. I think this right here, I'm not sure if this makes a difference tonally, but it kind of came with the preset. It's an acoustic guitar, so I picked an acoustic preset to start, and I worked from there. Pulled down a little bit more of the bottom, pushed a little bit more top, and I used this wide right here because I wanted it to feel a little bit atmospheric at that point. I know the vocals in the center channel, he's rapping at this point, and the vocal is probably going to be playing the same time as the guitar, right? So I did that to, spread things out a little bit. When I look at the track right here, it started off on 0 and the clip gain is on 0. So I was like, damn, I'm going to use the plugin to make it louder. But I was using the input of the CLA, kind of like driving it into it, because all of the CLA plugins, they kind of have like an input and an output, like a little grit, a little tone to it. Even if you turn off everything, it will have like a little sound to it. So I use this to make it louder, knowing that this is dirty gain and that the fader on my DAW is just clean gain. So it's a situation like that. And you heard a little bit width, a little bit more sustain, all that stuff. So then after that, we had these sounds right here. And I think this was a sound that only came through at the bridge. It's kind of like, it reminded me of Transformer, like Optimus Prime type shit. So just using the BX channel, you know, kind of trying to create a little separation, understanding that, you know, at one point in time I was using the SSLE, you know what I mean? And now I kind of want to give him like that same tone, which is still gluing, because this one is SSLE, but this one at the top is SSLE too, right? But look when this one comes, you see it comes right here, but then after that, you know, they're getting another SSLE, but that bit is a different variation of it. So creating separation, like they're like, whoa, like this sound still sounds like it's related to that other sound, but it's different though. You know what I mean? And then really the only thing I did was I was pushing just a tad bit of that transit. Dun, 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 dun. I just want that little Transformer Optimus Prime sound, Death Megatron 3 Bumblebee sound to come through. To come through a little bit more, and I just added a little bit of body, a little bit of weight, because at that point, you know, the pads were gone. You know, so it's all about seeing when shit is there, when shit isn't there, when shit is coming in and out. That's why I boosted just a little bit of a booty, a little bit of bottom, because I already see like these pads are kind of gone, and I still want it to have that same weight, keep that same energy and that same force. So then the last two things that we have here is these basic vocal chops that only come just literally at the beginning of the song, and I guess these were downloaded from Looperman, and pretty much the only thing I used was just a little bit of Avid lo-fi on both of them. I just dragged it down and just kind of gave a little bit more distortion, a little more grit.
I'm happy being me, an individual. I'm never gonna be.
So with the Avid distortion, kind of just helps to give it a little grit. I think he got those samples from like Splice or something like that. And, you know, I kind of wanted to take a little bit off of that digital edge. You know, it kind of sounded a little too high fidelity. That's kind of how you want your samples to be though. High fidelity, then you mangle it and you kind of get it fitting it in the track. So yeah, I just used a little bit of that distortion just to give like, get a little bit of snap, a little bit of the bite. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's kind of pretty much everything that I have for the music. And you know, nothing major after that. So next thing that we're gonna hop into is going to be the vocals, how I like to process the vocals for a song like this specifically. So all right, I will see you guys later in part 3. Peace.